But one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was we've sort of gone through the church and the royals, and then the other institution really is the BBC.
Yes.
I mean, we obviously know the history, Savile. There's been Huw Edwards, Phillip Schofield. Give me a rundown of that hypocrisy.
Well, I think it's been really interesting this year, obviously. Huw Edwards was the behemoth of British media, okay? This was somebody who was so respected, not by people like me, but so respected that he was chosen to obviously present the coronation. And he was also chosen to be the man who announced the death of the Queen. This is huge in the media establishment. And so then, of course, what we discover is this is a man who's paid a minimum of £35,000 to a very vulnerable 17-year-old in exchange for pornographic imagery.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's the least of it. But then there was
children.
Yeah. Of what?
Children, wasn't it?
Oh, well,
he was a child. Oh, hang on. What can we say? What can be said?
There's separate stories.
Okay.
I mean, he hasn't just done one thing. What he was
sorry,
actually convicted of was not that.
Yeah.
Right? That in itself is a scandal, because what happened was that Huw Edwards was sending this lad, this 17-year-old lad who was clearly very messed up, but sending him huge amounts of money in order to be able to, this lad sending him videos, and they're kind of like having video sex and all this kind of stuff, right? Which makes you want to just vomit even imagining it. Who wants to imagine it? But there's so much about this story, because the parents went to the BBC and complained, and the BBC dismissed it, which is why the parents were then forced to go to the Sun, which is what they did. But Huw Edwards has been a problem at the BBC for a very long time. New people entering the newsroom were told, do not be funnier than him, do not be smarter than him.
Oh.
This is what people were told, new journalists entering the newsroom at the BBC, that they couldn't be funnier or smarter than Huw Edwards. That should already tell you there's a problem.
Yeah.
Right? And it reminds me of Phillip Schofield in one respect. Obviously, Phillip Schofield was on a competing broadcaster, ITV. And Phillip Schofield was busted for having a quote unquote relationship with a young runner on the show. And the reason I go quote unquote relationship, because I don't know really how old that lad was when their relationship started. So I'm not going to necessarily apply the word relationship, because relationship suggests consensual.
Yes.
And if that lad was not of consensual age, then it wasn't consensual, and therefore it wasn't a relationship. So I'm always going to say quote unquote until somebody fesses up at ITV and tells the truth, because the inquiry was a whitewash. In fact, Andrew, on the day that I last sat down with you was the day that the Phillip Schofield inquiry was released. And I remember it because when I got home, I ended up getting up early because I'd worked at ITV and on This Morning for an awful long time. And I was getting calls from people I worked with at ITV saying it's a whitewash. They wouldn't talk to us. They don't want to know the truth about what happened. And nobody is going to tell the truth of how old he was when Phillip first met the lad. Right? So that was what was going on. That was literally like a year ago.
I think he's even changed, Philip, what age the kid was when he was
It's
met him.
changed.
When this relationship started.
It's fluctuated.
1 minute it was 18, then it was 21, because if it was 18 and they met beforehand, the kid would have been too young. He met him at a school when he was doing a speech at the school.
Right.
This is a little kid.
Well, you've got to bear in mind that Philip's brother was convicted and imprisoned for being a paedophile.
But does that run in the family? Is that
well,
a thing?
no, I'm not suggesting that. And it would be unfair to say that, wouldn't it? Because
but the story did come out right after. It was like we heard that one and then the other one was.
Yes.
So maybe there is some sort of link. I understand it's unfair to assume it.
It is.
But maybe there's some sort of childhood adversity that makes you prone to these things.
Could well be. But the thing is obviously defamation laws are such that because we don't know the truth about Phillip Schofield, but what we do know is ITV have covered it up. We do know that they have not allowed the full story to come out. And I think it's very interesting now that the main man behind it, Martin Frizzell, Fiona Phillips' husband, is now leaving ITV. Finally. And we're talking, in the most recent incarnation at ITV, he's been there for 10 years.
Yeah.
And that man knows a lot of secrets. He was the one who launched the Madeleine McCann narrative, Martin Frizzell. He launched the Madeleine McCann narrative that she had been abducted on the 4th of May, right? Martin.
We should clarify, because we spoke about this last time.
We did.
You believe that she was killed by or an accident by the parents?
I believe that an accident took place, and I believe that she was never abducted, and that I believe that the Portuguese police files are correct, and that is she likely fell down off the sofa onto the concrete floor, likely cracked her head and died behind the sofa. And that was why the cadaver and blood dogs came in and sniffed. And I think it was 15 out of 19 Aaliyah's, which corresponded with Madeleine's DNA, which is high. It's a high count. And nobody else had died in that apartment before because they'd done a history of it as well. So it's highly likely she died in that apartment.